A word about words from Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. The passions of mankind have boiled over into all areas of political life, including its vocabulary. The words most common in politics have become stained with human hurts, hopes, and frustrations. All of them are loaded with popular opprobrium, and their use results in a conditioned negative emotional response. Even the word politics itself, which Webster says is the science and art of government, is generally viewed in a context of corruption. Ironically, the dictionary synonyms are discreet, provident, diplomatic, and wise. The same discolorations attached to other words prevalent in the language of politics, words like power, self interest, compromise, and conflict. They become twisted and warped, viewed as evil. Nowhere is the prevailing political illiteracy more clearly revealed than in these typical interpretations of words. This is why we pause here for a word about words. Power. The question may legitimately be raised, why not use other words? Words that mean the same but are peaceful and do not result in such negative emotional reactions. There are a number of fundamental reasons for rejecting such substitution. First, by using combinations of words such as harnessing the energy instead of the single word power, we begin to dilute the meaning. And as we use purifying synonyms, we dissolve the bitterness, the anguish, the hate and love, the agony, and the triumph attached to these words, leaving a aesthetic imitation of life. In the politics of life, we are concerned with the slaves and the Caesars, not the Vestal virgins. It is not just that in communication as with in thought. We must ever strive towards simplicity. The masterpieces of philosophic or scientific statement are frequently no longer than a few words. For example, E equals mc squared. It is more than that. It is a determination not to detour around reality. What is about that? To use any other word but power is to change the meaning of everything we are talking about. As Mark Twain once put it, the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and the lightning bug. Power is the right word just as self interest, compromise, and the other simple political words are, for they were conceived in and have become part of politics from the beginning of time, to pander to those who have no stomach for straight language and insist upon bland, non controversial sauces is a waste of time. They cannot, on deliberately, hmm, They cannot or deliberately will not understand what we are discussing here. I agree with uh, Nietzsche's statement in the genealogy of morals on this point, quoting Nietzsche. Why stroke the hypersensitive ears of our modern weaklings? Why yield even a single step to the tartuffery of words? For us psychologists, that would involve a tartuffery of action. For a psychologist today shows his good taste, others may say integrity, in this, if in anything, that he resists the shamefully moralized manner of speaking which makes all modern judgments about men and things slimy. We approach a critical point when our tongues trap our minds. I do not propose to be trapped by tact at any expense of truth, striving to avoid the force, vigor, and simplicity of the word power. We soon become averse to thinking in vigorous, simple, honest terms. We strive to invent sterilized synonyms, cleansed of the opprobrium of the word power. But the new words mean something different, so that they tranquilize us, begin to shepherd our mental process as our mental processes of the main conflict ridden, grimy, and realistic power paved highway of life, to travel down the sweeter smelling, peaceful, more socially acceptable, more respectable, indefinite byways ends in a failure to achieve an honest understanding of the issues that we must come to grips with if we are to do the job. Let us look at the word power. Power, meaning ability, whether physical, mental, or moral, to act, has become an evil word with overtones and undertones that suggest the sinister, the unhealthy, the Machiavellian. It suggests a phantasmagoria of the nether regions. The moment the word power is mentioned, it is as though hell had been opened, exuding the stench of the devil's cesspool of corruption. It evokes images of cruelty, dishonesty, selfishness, arrogance, dictatorship, and abject suffering. The word power is associated with conflict. It is unacceptable in our present Madison Avenue deodorized hygiene, where controversy is blasphemous and the value is being liked and not offending others. Power, in our minds, has become almost synonymous with corruption and immortality. Wait, immorality. Excuse me, not immortality. Immorality. Immoral. Whenever the word power is mentioned, somebody sooner or later will refer to the classical statement of Lord Acton and cite it as follows: Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. In fact, the correct quotation is: Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We can't even read Acton's statement accurately. Our minds are so confused by our conditioning. The corruption of power is not in power, but in ourselves. And yet, what is this power which men live by and to a significant degree live for? Power is the very essence, the dynamo of life. It is the power of the heart pumping blood and sustaining life in the body. It is the power of active citizen participation, pulsing upward, providing a unified strength for a common purpose. Power is an essential life force, always in operation, either changing the world or opposing change. Power, or organized energy, may be a man killing explosive or a life saving drug. The power of a gun may be used to enforce slavery or to achieve freedom. The power of the human brain can create man's most glorious achievements and develop perspectives and insights into the nature of life opening horizons previously beyond the imagination. The power of the human mind can also devise philosophies and ways of life that are most destructive for the future of mankind. Either way, power is the dynamo of life. Alexander Hamilton, in the Federalist Papers, put it this way: what is a power but the ability or faculty of doing a thing? What is the ability to do a thing but the power of employing the means necessary to its execution? Pascal, who was definitely not a cynic, observed that justice without power is impotent. Power without justice is tyranny. Saint Ignatius, the founder of the Jesuit order, did not shrink from the recognition of power when he issued his dictum: to do a thing well, a man needs power and competence. We could call the role of all who have played their parts in history and find the word power, not a substitute word, used in their speech and writings. It is impossible to conceive of a world devoid of power. The only choice of concepts is between organized and unorganized power. Mankind has progressed only through learning how to develop and organize instruments of power in order to achieve order, security, morality, and civilized life itself, instead of a sheer struggle for physical survival. Every organization known to man, from government down, has had only one reason for being, that is, organization for power in order to put into practice or promote its common purpose. When we talk about a person's lifting himself by his own bootstraps, we are talking about power. Power must be understood for what it is, for the part it plays in every area of our life, if we are to understand it and thereby grasp the essentials of relationships and functions between groups and organizations, particularly in a pluralistic society. To know power and not fear, it is essential to its constructive use and control. In short, life without power is death. A world without power would be a ghostly wasteland, a dead planet. Self interest. Self interest, like power, wears the black shroud negative uh, of negativism and suspicion. To many, the synonym for self interest is selfishness. The word is associated with a repugnant conglomeration of vices such as narrowness, self seeking, and self centeredness. Everything that is opposite to the virtues and altruism of selflessness. This common definition is contrary, of course, to our everyday experiences as well as to the observations of all great students of politics and life. The myth of altruism as motivating factor in our behavior could arise and survive only in a society bundled in the sterile gauze of New England Puritanism and Protestant morality, and tied together with the ribbons of Madison Avenue public relations. It is one of the classic American fairy tales. From the great teachers of Judeo Christian morality and the philosophers, to the economists, and to the wise observers of the politics of man, there has always been a universal agreement on the part that self interest plays as a prime moving force in man's behavior. The importance of self interest has never been challenged. It has been accepted as an inevitable fact of life. In the words of Christ, greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Aristotle said in Politics, everyone thinks chiefly of his own, hardly ever of the public interest. Adam Smith, in The Wealth of Nations, noted that it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard of their own self interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantage. In all the reasoning found in the Federalist Papers, no point is so central and agreed upon as rich and poor alike are prone to act upon impulse rather than pure reason and narrow conceptions of self interest. To question the force of self interest that pervades all areas of political life is to refuse to see man as he is, to see him only as we would like him to be. And yet, next to this acceptance of self interest, there are certain observations I would like to make. Machiavelli, with whom the idea of self interest seems to have gained its greatest notoriety, at least among those who are unaware of the tradition, said, "This is to be asserted in general of men, that they are ungrateful, fickle, fake, cowardly, covetous. As long as you succeed, they are yours entirely. They will offer you their blood, property, life, and children when the need is far distant. But when it approaches, they turn against you." But Machiavelli makes a mortal mistake when he rules out the moral factors of politics, when he rules out the moral factors of politics and holds purely to self interest as he defines it. This mistake can only be accounted for on the basis that Machiavelli's experience as an active politician was not too great, for otherwise he could not have overlooked the obvious fluidity of every man's self interest. The overall case must be of larger dimensions than that of self interest narrowly defined. It must be large enough to include a and provide for the shifting dimensions of self interest. You may appeal to one self interest to get to me. You may appeal to one self interest to get me to the battlefront to fight. But once I am there, my prime self interest becomes to stay alive. And if we are victorious, my self interest may, and usually does, dictate entirely unexpected goals rather than those I had before the war. For example, the United States in World War II fervently allied with Russia against Germany, Japan, and Italy, and shortly after victory, fervently allied with its former enemies, Germany, Japan, and Italy, against its former ally, the USSR. These drastic shifts of self interest can be rationalized only under a huge, limitless umbrella of general moral principles such as liberty, justice, freedom, a higher than made man than man-made law, and so on. Morality, so called, becomes the continuum of self-interest's shift. Within this morality, there appears to be a tearing conflict, probably due to the layers of inhibition in our own moralistic civilization. It appears shameful to admit that we operate on a basis of naked self interest, so we desperately try to reconcile every shift of circumstances that is to our self interest in terms of broad moral justification or rationalization. With one breath, we point out that we are utterly opposed to communism, but that we love the Russian people. Loving people is in keeping with the tenets of our civilization. What we hate about what we hate is the atheism and the suppression of the individual that we attribute to that we attribute as characteristics substantiating the immorality of communism. On this, we base our powerful opposition. We do not admit the actual fact, our own self interest. We proclaimed all of these negative, diabolical Russian characteristics just prior to the Nazi invasion of Russia. The Soviets were then cynical despots who connived in the in the non-aggression pact with Hitler, the ruthless invaders who brought disaster to the Poles and the Finns. To be continued in part 2. A Jew. What is it? Now, how do can I save it? What happens when I just X out of it?